Welcome to the Sports Trading Card Hall of Fame. Today I'm doing essentially my chapter 4 of Stories of Cardboard and my second induction into the Sports Trading Card Hall of Fame's Binder of Fame. There are 3 stories I'm going to talk about, and then obviously I'm going to be elevating one of the previous stories up into the honor of being inducted. And the 3 stories are all football related, which for some people might be kind of confusing because football isn't usually thought of as a hotbed for evolution in cards. But really, outside of the 90s, baseball is kind of the leading edge for innovation. Not so much in the new millennium, but obviously in the vintage era. But in the 90s, that was football. That was not entirely football, but football was easily the driving force during that decade. So there's actually a lot about football to discuss there. But before I get to talking about those 3 stories, I do want to elevate the second induction into the Binder of Fame, which is the 1952 Mickey Mantle card. And you'll notice I kind of hesitated there because I almost said rookie card. And that's part of the thing about this card is the fact that for a lot of people, they think it's his rookie card. And it's very understandable that they would think that. Because in some ways, it kind of is. And for some people, it most definitely is. Now, the reality of it is it's not. But the card is iconic on a number of different levels. So the first induction that I did was the Honus Wagner card, which everybody outside of sports cards, that's the card they know. Inside of sports cards, we all know the Mickey Mantle card. And the Mickey Mantle card plays a number of roles, one of which is it is the standard bearer for the first true early modern card set, 1952 Topps. And this is where the rookie card component gets kind of murky, because for some people, they consider that 52 Topps set to basically be the first true card. And then before that, they're not really rookie cards, which is anybody who believes that is just stupid. But setting that aside, it's all about iconography. That's the thing about the 52 Topps card is the fact that it just looks like everything it's supposed to be. If you look at the actual Mickey Mantle rookie card from Bowman, it doesn't look like much. It's just another card. So there's nothing that really brings you in, and really it's pretty forgettable. Whereas the 52 card is very iconic. It has all the right things that it needs to have. So when you look at it, it looks like it's supposed to be that first great card. Now, 52 Topps is the first card set that did all the things that we're used to in cards. And so we look at that card set and we like to talk about it like it changed the industry. It didn't. It did almost nothing for the industry. The only thing, because there were only 2 card companies, there was Topps and Bowman, and the only thing that Bowman did to react was to make their card bigger. That was it. Otherwise, Bowman still kept making pretty much the same card moving forward. They made some changes like they'd always been doing, but 52 Topps, it laid out a template that Bowman didn't bother to get into. And it was the fact that Bowman would be purchased by Topps just a few years later and then wrapped up into it so that by the end of the decade, Topps was the only card company making cards. That's why everything that you see in the 52 card is so significant, because it didn't change the industry. It's just that the industry pared down to one lane, and then when it widened out, everybody looked at what that one lane was and just said, oh, well, that's a card. And so it's just the beginning of Topps. That's all it is. But for us, when we look back, that's the beginning of cards as we know it. So for us, that is the starting point. It is the rookie card set for cards. That for us, that's basically what it is. And Mickey Mantle is the great iconic card in that set. And so that card is the iconic card for the set and for the whole concept of what this is. But on top of that, it's also about a generation. It's about that time when baby boomers were growing up. They were kids, they were teenagers, they were collecting cards. And this card represents that long lost hidden gem that we wish that our father still had. Although that's an important part of the story that I'm going to be getting into when I actually talk in depth about this, that is actually misleading. But I don't want to get into that now. The key is that this card is iconic on so many levels because it stands for everything that the beginning of modern cards is supposed to have. It's in an archaic time. It's related roughly to World War II. It has to do with a generation that defined the standards by which all of us in Gen X built our world. It does all of those things, and it's the most iconic and probably the greatest player in the sport that defined cards for a long time, etc., etc., etc. But we're in a new era now, and the new era has different perspectives, and you look back 30 years in the past here, and now you're looking at basically the Michael Jordan rookie card, and the Jordan rookie card also has an old quality to it because it's back when cards were still made on cardboard. It is a generational gap where you have now the parents, basically that's the card that they grew up on. The player is the most iconic. It does all the same things that the Mickey Mantle card did. So where you have Honus Wagner, and then you jump ahead to Mickey Mantle. Now you jump ahead to Michael Jordan. Mickey Mantle's 1952 card, this is now becoming a part of the continuum. It's no longer being the most iconic card that it had been for so long, which makes it a perfect time to place it into a Sports Trading Card Hall of Fame to make sure that it really does have that iconic stature of one of the gold standards. Not that we're going to forget about it, but the conversation is changing in cards, and that means that what the Mickey Mantle card always represented is no longer what it once was. But enough about that. I want to go on to the other three stories, and since we are talking about rookie cards, whether they're valid rookie cards or not, it's a perfect segue to go into my first story, which is about the innovation of rookie cards. And for a modern collector, this is just going to seem stupid, but there was an invention of draft pick rookie cards, and it happened in 1989. True, there had been a couple of rookie cards before then, or draft pick rookie cards before then, but they didn't really matter. In 1989, Score invented the draft pick rookie card. And it's weird to look at it and go, wait, so in 1988, nobody cared about rookies, and yeah, that's basically what it was. But the reason for that is because that's what cards are. Cards are not about the future, they're about the past. They're yearbook entries. It's talking about what just happened. So you're looking at the players who were successful last year. You're looking at the stats that they had last year. You're reading about their performance last year. You're looking at the league leaders and the highlights from last year. You're looking at the Super Bowl or the World Series winner. That's who you're looking at. So everything about cards is looking back one step. And until a player proves himself and becomes known and somebody you pay attention to, he's never going to appear on a card, so he's got to earn his place on a card. Well, in 1989, that changed because Score, who had started off in 1988 making a higher end, just another baseball card set, when they stepped over into football, which was a wide open territory, they wanted to do something different. And they did a couple of things that were different, and one of them was that they added draft pick players to their set. Now, you can ask yourself, well, why didn't Topps do that? Well, it's kind of weird because Topps had started doing that in baseball with a couple of draft pick players every single year, but in baseball, nobody cares. A draft pick player, they're probably not going to be very successful. You got to let them run through the system and learn about who they are. But while that is how it works in baseball and in hockey, in basketball and football, their minor league is called the NCAA, college sports. And so by the time a player is at the end of college sports, it's the same thing as moving up to the majors. That's what they're doing. They're moving from college into the professional sports, which means now they are the prospects. And so it's a whole different mindset. Now in basketball, they weren't doing anything with it because Fleer was making little tiny sets. But over in football, Topps had a much bigger set, except it was actually half the size of what they were doing in baseball. And so they didn't have a lot of room. And football actually has more players than baseball, so again, they didn't have a lot of room. They just didn't care, and fans weren't beating down the doors buying Topps cards to inspire Topps to go this route. So Score looked and said, well, wait a minute, nobody's doing draft pick players? We can do that. And they put it in the set, and overnight, and I mean like within the very same year, Pro Set created the first Series 2 card set that we'd had since almost the 60s. And Topps came out and they made it their first rookie and traded set for football. And Score had to keep up with all the activity that was going on, so they made a supplemental set. That means that Score came out with draft pick rookies, and then by the end of the year, everybody had made a whole bunch of rookie cards right there. In 1990, it was so big that over in baseball, okay, Score put a couple of rookies in. Nothing of note, but over in football, everybody had rookie cards. Most of the sets had rookie cards in the main sets, usually in Series 1 or the only release. In the case of Action Pack, they had a whole separate release just for rookie cards. It was truly an overnight explosion of activity. And over the years, it would just continue to not necessarily grow as much as continue to build in importance. So that by the end of the decade, as you got to the year 2000, rookies became the thing that drove the industry. Now, it wasn't really pushing the industry forward like it would in the years since, to the point where now that is what the industry is. The rookie cards, those draft pick rookie cards, are really what drive everybody. Not so much in baseball, of course, but in football and basketball, most definitely it is. But the industry needed somebody to break through that door, and that was Score in 1989. And those cards, they opened the door for one of the most important contributions to football cards and to all cards that we desperately needed it. That, at the end of the day, we desperately needed it. They were the ones who did it. Thank you for doing it. And it's so weird to think that somebody had to think outside of the box to do this, but that's how it worked. But one of the things about that was that we came to the realization that there will never be a single rookie card for any player, because now everybody's making a ton of rookie cards, so it's just not going to happen. And that leads me to my second story, which is one of the most important cards in sports card history, the 1992 Pacific Ben Coates rookie card. This card is a real out of left field kind of affair. This is a surprising card that very few people know about today, but in 1995, everybody knew about this card. And that's the importance of the story. And I'm talking about 1995 is when they knew about this 1992 card. Yeah, that's exactly the case. So the reason we assumed that there would never be just one rookie card for any player was because we were getting all of the rookies. And then any time that a player like, say, Jeff Blake was successful, everybody picked up on it at the same time. Everybody made cards about him. Well, that's all fine and good, but what if there's a player who hasn't quite hit it big yet, just happens to show up in a set? And that was what happened in 1992, where Pacific, who was still struggling to be even discovered, they had a pretty big card set to work with. And they had a surprisingly small number of stars in their set. They actually had extra room. And so there were a few players that they threw in there who were just not really that well known. And Ben Coates was a tight end on the New England Patriots who had 2 games that he played in his rookie season. I mean, he did really well in those 2 games, but he only had 2 games. And so Pacific had some pictures of him and they made a card of him. And then promptly forgot, because in the next year, in the 1992 season, he didn't do anything. 1993, though, he finally started to break through and become a really solid tight end. Not a phenomenal tight end, but a solid starter tight end. And people started to notice him and want to look for his cards. So that was great for 1993. Pacific was finally starting to get discovered because people were looking going, oh, there's his rookie card. What's this Pacific brand? But then in 1994, that was a whole nother story. He had over 1,000 yards for a tight end. Monster numbers. And everybody went, wait, who is this guy? He's the next big star. We got to get his cards. And so in the year 1994, that's when the whole industry discovered Pacific. Pacific was already picking up steam because in 1993, they'd basically been discovered because of Ben Coates. But it was in 1994, that's when the whole industry started searching out Ben Coates. And if you didn't know what the Pacific brand was at that time, you learned in a hurry. And it took a card company and it basically introduced that card company to the entire world and turned them into one of the main brands, one of the main movers and shakers of football. So this is a card that actually managed to pull off the unthinkable of individually introducing a card to a whole industry. That's what a promo is supposed to do. This was just a random card that did it. But it also caused the entire industry to look and go, how did we miss that? How do we get that card that years down the road is going to pop up and then everybody's going to know who we are? And a lot of companies started to take chances on players that didn't really necessarily have much of a chance. That's why by the year 2000, we have so many Tom Brady cards, because card companies just kept trying to get a whole bunch of extra rookies in there. Maybe one of these guys might turn out. And it wasn't that there was like one or two card companies doing that, because in 1993 that was the case. Trent Green has a rookie card, Mark Brunell has a couple of rookie cards because of the same kind of concept. But by the year 2000, everybody needed to be in on that game because the lessons that were learned over time. And Ben Coates, that rookie card, is one of those that actually made a serious impact. But the thing is, it did it as an individual card. It's the card in the set, not the set, the card in the set that made a difference. And it's very rare that you find a card that actually on its own impacts the hobby. Okay, you could maybe say that the Reggie Jackson autograph. Sure, that one might work. Okay, well, what about the Pro Set hologram? Yeah, that one would definitely work too. The 89 Pro Set Santa Claus might work as well. You could make the argument for the late 90s Babe Ruth memorabilia card, which caused a huge stir. That one definitely fits. But the thing is, it's a very small group of cards that individually impacted the whole industry. The Ben Coates card did. And that's why, while it's a card that hardly anybody even knows about right now, because it's not worth anything, because Ben Coates did not have the great career that we had all expected, it's a story we need to make sure we don't forget. It's a really important card. Even if it doesn't have the staying power or the aesthetics that you would normally want, still, it's a great card. So, that's story number 2, and I could come up with some convoluted way to segue into the third topic that I want to get into, but I'm not going to bother. I'm just going to go ahead and say it. I also need to talk about 1990 Pro Set. This is the only card set that can stand pretty much alongside 1988 Score, because what 1988 Score did was it drew a line in the sand and it said, after this, every card has to be like this or better. And every card, except for Bowman, did exactly that. And so it laid out a template for card companies to follow, but it didn't absolutely shake the industry up. 1990 Pro Set did. In fact, there are 4 card sets in 1990 that essentially hit the reset button on the whole hobby. There was 1990 Leaf, there was 1991 Skybox, there was 1990 Action Packed, and there was 1990 Pro Set. The other 3 cards did have an impact, varying degrees of impact, but the 1990 Pro Set card, it totally reset the industry. And you can look, I mean, the card did a couple of things. First off, it got rid of part of the border. The card image now just runs right off, and it just makes the image so much more lively. It also had team colors, which meant that the whole set had a different kind of theme. The card back was far more professional than anything you found from anyone else. And the images were really, really strong. Now, you can also say that 1990 Score Football did the same thing, and that's true. That's one of the places where 1990 Score Football holds up with the Pro Set set. But the thing is that when you look at all of these things, it was night and day from what you'd seen in the previous year. But the rest of the hobby was still sleeping. It was only Pro Set and Score in football. Because you look at 1989, and with 89, you could see that all the pieces were in place for a lot of competition, but you didn't really see much of a change from 88 to 89. The two years do look kind of similar. You look to 1990, and there are just a couple of sets that actually look like a significant leap forward, and one of those is Pro Set. It's almost kind of surreal in many ways. It is kind of blocky, so for some people they look back and that's what they're going to see. But for anybody who was used to cards in 89, there was nothing to prepare you for 1990 Pro Set. And it was so impactful that in the same year, Action Packed released a later release of all Madden cards that by that very time was already at a 3/4 bleed. So within the same year, Action Packed was already responding to Pro Set and building a next level card in their all Madden cards. So we were already pretty much off to the races. But 1991, you could really see just how big of an impact they had, because the impact was phenomenal. Again, you look from 89 to 1990, and most of the cards look kind of the same, except for just a few. You looked at 1990 versus 1991, and it's like a couple years of difference. I mean, it really is stark. You had no bordered cards of Stadium Club, you had Pro Line, you had Action Packed, you had the half-bleed card of Ultra. And so you already had a couple of cards that were coming out that were just going all the way out, trying to emulate that. You look at the card back of Score, they were responding, desperately trying to keep up with or surpass Pro Set. It was pretty impressive to see just how much everything was changing, but those are the direct changes. There were a lot of other changes that were going on as well, of card companies trying to keep up with or surpass Pro Set. But that's the thing, Pro Set in 1990, they set a whole nother standard, and they put that standard out and said that is what cards are going to have to be, and you'd better keep up with that. So where in 1988, Score said, this is what the template that you've got to work with for your cards, make sure that you're at least doing this. With Pro Set in 1990, they said, no, we're already past you guys. You guys are going to have to catch up to us and hopefully surpass us. And some companies were absolutely up for that. Some companies weren't. But there were a lot of influences that the 1990 Pro Set card set had that you can directly see in 1991 and 1992. But that was the thing about Pro Set, was more than any other card, that was the card set that shook everybody up and forced the beginning of the chaotic nature of the 1990s. And it is something that you have to respect. You really have to respect just how important that set is. You can talk about 52 tops, you can talk about 89 upper deck. They didn't change the industry. 1990 Pro Set did. So again, I'm going to be talking about these topics in later videos, so definitely tune in for those. If you are curious about what I've already talked about in the past, the other series of stories of cardboard, definitely do check those out. Other than that, I want to thank you guys for watching. Do subscribe if you haven't done so already. Thanks.